Welcome to Warrior Stories. My name is Susanna Clark. Today is April 19th, 2023, and my guest today is Deanna Rennon. Hi, Deanna. How are you?
I'm doing well, enjoying the weather.
Yes, it's finally spring. It's finally starting to get warm outside. It makes all the difference, doesn't it? I always like to share up front in my interviews how I know my guests. And Deanna, you and I were both participants in the Virginia Partners in Policymaking Advocacy Training Program put on by the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, and we were 2022 graduates. And so that's how
Yes.
we know one another. And even though you and I selected different advocacy topics, so we didn't necessarily have a lot of opportunity to work with one another outside of the training program, we did have the chance to meet and get to know each other a little bit. And I have to say that that's one of the most meaningful parts of that program for me was meeting people that I otherwise never would have met, right? And just realizing how many people there are, in the broader Virginia community that are doing and have done so much good work in the disability space. And I really enjoyed getting to know you and learning more about some of the work that you've done in this area. And I'm just really excited that you've agreed to come on Warrior Stories and share your story, because I think the things that you've learned and the wisdom that you've gained will just be really valuable to other people. So thank you for coming on Warrior Stories.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be able to share some of my experiences. I enjoy getting to meet all of the people through PIP, and it's been a good experience just in connecting with self-advocates and parents as advocates and caregivers as advocates, because in the work I do, typically I'm advocating for people within our agency,
Right.
not seeing the connections within the greater community sometimes. So it's nice to have the opportunity to connect with other people that are dealing with some of the same struggles that I deal with. So I'm happy to be here and share my experiences.
Really excited to have you here. So one of the things that I like to ask, especially parents that come on Warrior Stories, is, tell me about the day that changed your life forever. And for me, it was just one day, like there is a line of demarcation in my story where before a certain day, for me, it was September 14th, 2011. That date is seared into my brain, where before that point, I didn't know my life was about to change drastically. There were signs, some red flags that I could only see later in regard to my daughter's health and her abilities, but I couldn't see it for what it was because I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And then there was that day where I was told my daughter was blind, and from then on, everything changed. And we came to find out that there were so many other issues besides blindness that she would end up dealing with. But for me, it's just one day. It's not like that for all parents. A lot of parents, there's a series of events that kind of lead to that shift. So, I love hearing the stories of other parents. Tell me about the day or the series of events that changed your life forever.
So for us, it was a series of events, but also a day. So
Mhm.
it was really for my youngest daughter, Erica. She was our fourth child. When she was born, we had no clue there were any differences between her and her siblings. So it really was going along. You just do the day to day. I was a working mom. I worked in a daycare. They all went to the daycare. So we just did our day to day. It was just she tagged along with everything we did. There was no differences in anything. It was at about a year, maybe 9 months actually, when she really started to show some delays, in my opinion. And it was just kind of a maternal instinct, just, she's not meeting some of those milestones that I would have expected her to meet based on my experience with my other kids and just my experience with developmental and children over the years, because I
Right.
had always cared for other children. I'd always been involved. So I'd always known kind of these milestone points where, the first step, you always waited for the first step, and it's so exciting, and you always wanted to be there and be present for that. And with Erica, it just wasn't happening. For her year birthday, we bought her one of those push behind toys, and she couldn't use it because she would topple over. It was, she wasn't even cruising furniture at that point, and it was just so bizarre to me. And I thought, well, gosh, my husband and I were both healthy. I really just didn't think anything of it. And we went for her year checkup, and even the pediatrician that we were with he had seen all of our kids grow up. They were all, between the ages of 0 and 6 at that time. And so he knew that they all hit their milestones, and really just felt like we were just a busy family. We had a lot going on. We were just grabbing her and going. And she just hadn't gotten there yet. So he really wasn't worried. And so for me, I was still just not 100% on board with that. I wasn't upset with him. I just wasn't really sure what was going on, but I felt like there might have been more to the story. And so for her 15-month check, we went and saw same office, but chose a different pediatrician in the office, just to get another set of eyes on. And really immediately she validated me, and it just, as a parent, you think, but when somebody else says, yeah, there's something else going on here, it just gives you that sense of, okay, I'm not off base. There's a reason why some of these things are happening. It's not because I'm just picking her up and going and not giving her a chance to grow and develop. It really is something within her that isn't allowing her to take those milestone steps. So once that hit, we really were referred on to therapy. And still in my head, I thought, okay, we'll do a little therapy and she'll be great. We'll have no issues. She'll catch up with her peers. She'll be in preschool and moving right along to kindergarten, just like her siblings as they got older. And I really didn't think still anything was permanently going to change. I really thought that this was a temporary shift in our life and we were going to get all these things in place and find her to be, right up there with everybody else that she was growing alongside. So then, we were doing therapy in the homes for a while, and it was that therapist that actually identified a few things when Erica had kind of hit some plateaus with her therapy that she thought were more neurological. And for me, just hearing that was a little disheartening because I was like, wow, like neurological brain, I had started my path years ago in nursing school. So I knew enough to get me in trouble. I kind of knew enough that it kind of sent me down one path when I needed to just focus and really be present with what was happening. And
You hear the word neurological, that's not something that is easily fixable. Like that has serious ramifications. You just didn't know yet how serious they were, right?
That's right. That's right. Exactly. It went from being, oh, it's just a developmental delay to maybe there's something more serious going on. And so we went and had an MRI done, and that was November of 2008. Mm-hmm. And at that point, she had just turned 2. We scheduled the appointment. Of course, it takes forever to get into those kind of things. So it wasn't an immediate thing. By the time we got there in November, we had already had this on our minds and kind of processing what this might mean. Right. And so we went for the MRI and they told us 45 minutes, maybe, she's got to be put to sleep because she's so little. And so that was another thing. It was like the first time she was put to sleep under general anesthesia. And you're just like, wow, like I shouldn't be experiencing this when somebody's 2. It was really, really scary because you just didn't really know how that would impact her. And so they told us, go get a coffee down at the cafe, come back, and she should be out and ready to be in recovery. And you can go in there with her at that point. Well, we came back. 45 minutes went by, another half hour went by. We're still sitting in the waiting room. Nobody has come to get us. Nobody has come to say anything. And I was just really getting anxious. And my husband, he's a little more relaxed and just kind of like, well, they'll come when it's time, and he doesn't have the medical background. So he was oblivious. He really just didn't, he just assumed it was, just taking their time, or they got backed up behind another person getting an MRI or something. And it was like, no, we need to know what's going on. We need to talk to the lady at the front desk. So I walked up to her and I said, my daughter was supposed to be out an hour ago. Can you tell me what's going on? And of course, at the front desk, they don't have much information, but she did say that they called up and said they needed to do some additional scans. And that was like, so that was kind of the moment for me where I was like, that's not a good sign. That this isn't just them going in and they've done their scan and they're good and they're done. But of course, the rules of that day was you just come for the MRI and you go home. You don't get the results.
Right.
So then you wait and wait and wait. And of course, her scan was November 25th of 2008. So that was, it was like the Tuesday or Wednesday before Thanksgiving, something around that time frame. And so I knew we wouldn't hear anything over the holiday weekend. So I was just, that whole weekend, you're just beside yourself. You're trying to be involved with family and have an enjoyable holiday. And all you can think about is what's going to come back. What are they going to tell us? And so for Erica, The following week, we got the doctor had called and let us know that, we needed to come back in, but he wanted us to come to, and we were seeing him. He was in Fairfax, I believe. And he was through Children's Hospital, but he wasn't at Children's in DC.
Right.
But when he called us for the results, he said, we really need you to come up to the Children's Hospital in DC and do some additional testing. We have a white matter clinic because she has what they considered at that time a leukodystrophy, but they didn't know which leukodystrophy, because there's several hundred, some that they didn't have diagnoses for, so they'd be like a leukodystrophy unspecified, and then other ones that had really progressive disorders. And so then we were left, for the next few weeks before we got the appointment up at Children's in DC, wondering which one, because some of them, kids don't live very long. And it was really frightening because you just don't know. So we got there, had all that testing, and then it was kind of, okay, she's one of the ones we just don't know. It's a leukodystrophy. We know it's a white matter disorder. She's missing most of the white matter in her brain, so she has majority of gray matter. And so with her, it affects intellectual functioning, it affects vision, it affects mobility, because her cerebellum, which is kind of the mobile center, is also half the size of kind of a normal average child at any age, as she grows.
Right.
So that was kind of what they told us.
Yeah.
This is what it is. This is what it looks like. We have no prognosis. We really don't know what's causing it. We really don't know anything else, but we know that this is happening.
Right.
So I would say between those couple weeks, that was kind of our life change, because at that point I knew there's no cure.
Right.
There's, I don't know if she will live to be 10. I don't know if she'll live to be 30. It's just really, at that point, it was really challenging.
Right.
Fast forward about 9 months from there, and I had gone back to school. I was in college for a psychology degree, and we had to Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia. That's where I went back for my bachelor's, and they required you to be in school on Labor Day. So they didn't take off for the Labor Day holiday. So my husband was all upset because he had the kids, and we usually go boating, and this was like a big deal to him that he had to watch all 4 kids and we couldn't go boating. And I said, well, I have class. I can't, there's nothing I can do about it. Meanwhile, I had about an hour and a half break in between my classes. And so I was doing some research online for a class to try to pick an article that I wanted to write a paper on. And I came across a research article, and looking at pictures, they had pictures of open mouths. And so my daughter's teeth, as they came in from the molars forward, and she never got the front 2 top ones and never got the front 2 bottom ones. And a typical developing toddler, those teeth are what comes in first.
Right.
And then it goes the other direction. Hers came the other way. So I see this picture of this open mouth and missing these 4 teeth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks like my daughter's mouth. I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. And that was how it all started. While we were meeting for her actual the original diagnosis with the other neurologist, he had linked us at DC with a neurologist that was working specifically on white matter disorders. She was doing research. She was a geneticist. She was really involved heavily in white matter disorders and really ran that clinic. And so he had introduced us to her just briefly and said, at your next visit, this is who you will see, because she really leads this clinic up here in DC. And it just so happened, when I'm looking at that article, her name was in that article.
Oh my gosh.
As one of the researchers. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the lady that we're meeting with next time.
Right.
So I emailed her from my college on Labor Day and just attached the article and said, I know you're one of the writers of this article, one of the researchers, and I would love it if you would look at this and examine the research you've done, so that when we meet with you, we're scheduled to meet with you in a month or so, if you can give me any indication if this might give us some answers. I got home Labor Day afternoon. I was we were grilling out, and I was out on my back porch, and the phone rang. And of course, this was landline days. So I went and grabbed the phone, and it was her. She was calling me from the Netherlands.
Wow.
Several hours after I emailed her, she said, I'm actually at a conference with those doctors about this particular article that you just sent me. I'm sorry, I got your email while I was on the plane, so I had to wait until I landed. we need to get you in. I'm calling the scheduler. We're getting you in as soon as I get back, because there is a good
Wow.
chance that you're going to have this. And that was how we came across her diagnosis.
That's amazing. So just let's step back just for a minute because I am completely unfamiliar with this syndrome. Is it a syndrome, a diagnosis?
It is.
Will you
At
spell
that time they
for
called
us?
it 4-H syndrome.
Okay, 4-H syndrome.
But it's a leukodystrophy, so it's LEUKO dystrophy.
Leukodystrophy. You're giving me
And
your education today.
so originally they called it 4-H syndrome because it's a lot of words. It's hypomyelination, hypodontia, hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. So it encompasses a wide range of things. So the hypodontia, that's the teeth issue, just
Right,
in simple terms. The hypomyelination is the lack of white matter in the brain.
right,
And then the hypogonadic hypogonadism is because oftentimes children with this disorder never hit puberty. They never reach puberty. They never go through puberty. So there's all sorts of other things that come along with that. And then it really varies. At that time, back when we first found out that was kind of when subjectively they said, because at that time there was no testing for it. So it
right,
really was a subjective. The doctors would look at the MRIs, they would look at the teeth, they would look at their stature and a couple other things to kind of subjectively say, yes, these people fall into this category.
right,
Because they just really had nothing else to go by, but they were finding groups of people that all had these similar characteristics.
right.
That's how she was originally diagnosed with that. And it wasn't guaranteed. It was just, this is what we think it
Yeah,
is based on her, all of her tests that have kind of come back in that way, because her MRI did show the same pattern that they were seeing.
right. That whole story is incredible. And I want to stop for a minute and highlight. I want to give parents of children with disabilities a huge shout out right now. Okay. Because doctors are amazing. They are so smart.
Yes.
They're so intelligent. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. So I'm going to say more often than not, if not all the time, physicians go into a medical career because, yes, it's interesting to them. But I think most of them genuinely care about people. They want to help people. That's why they become physicians. But I have heard so many stories like yours, where a parent of a child with disabilities, just trying to figure things out for their child to make sure that their child is okay, ends up doing research, bringing information to medical professionals' attention. They dig into these very niche areas of the medical world and become experts themselves. We don't ever get degrees for our expertise, right? But
Yes.
I have educated doctors countless times on my daughter's
You have to.
diagnoses. And I just want to give a shout out to parents of children with disabilities and medically fragile children, because I'm patting myself on the back and you on the back right now. I don't think parents are given enough credit for how we move this work forward for the medical field and for so many other children who come after ours, who end up benefiting from the work that we're doing. And we don't think of it as changing the world. We're just trying to take care of our babies that we love so much. But parents have made a huge difference in helping other children who come after their children when they engage in this work and when they just try to figure out the answers. And when I love that this physician called you directly, because she recognized that her work would benefit from getting involved with your daughter, right? Because of the research that you had done. And I think that's so incredible. And the other day when we were chatting, you talked about how your daughter is a standard now for testing other people. Is that right?
Yes.
Will you tell us about that?
Yes. So she actually, because of that connection, the doctor that we were working with asked if we were willing to have her be a participant in their research studies that they were doing, because they were doing an additional research after that one was already a published study. They were working on another study just on white matter disorders, specifically for this 4-H syndrome, they called it at the time. What they were trying to do was identify within the genes where there were the mistakes. You don't call, everybody has mistakes on their genomes, so it was really trying to find where those mistakes were where things weren't coding properly, what was happening.
When you say mistakes, do you just mean like abnormalities that they were seeing on the genome, or like where they didn't develop
Yes.
in a typical way? Is that what you mean?
Yes. So depending on the different types of coding, sometimes there's a letter that gets left off in
Mhm.
your RNA.
Right.
And so with Erica, they were able to, through that research that she was involved in, they were able to identify, because originally the research doctors came back with her when she and another young lady were added to the study. They were both very similar. At that time, I had actually, when we were at the National Institute of Health doing the research, I was able to meet the other young lady and her father. She was 19 at the time, and Erica was 3 at the time. They were both very similar. It was interesting because the father would say to us, wow, Erica really reminds me of my daughter when she was that age. So they were just very similar in their presentation. And the research doctors had told our doctor that they didn't think that our children had the same disorder because they weren't finding the same mistakes on their genome that they had found with the other bulk of individuals with that disorder. And our doctor and then this other young lady's doctor were adamant that they continue to look, and they were able to identify within the genome another strain based on my daughter and this other daughter of this disorder. So
Gotcha.
there are several, and now since then they've identified a third. So there are 3 different types, and now they call them polar 3 disorders because it's on the polar 3 gene in which the mistakes happen. So she is, yes. So now her and this other young lady are used as a standard for people to be checked for polar 3B, which is what she has.
That's incredible. And again, I just think it's a gift to humanity for you to have done what you've done in regard to the research and these amazing medical professionals who have been involved in your daughter's care, medical care. I just love how that will continue to benefit other families in the future. The legwork that you've been involved in will ease other people's journey in the future. They will have more answers more quickly than you did. And that's really significant, I think.
Yes. And I think for me, it's really about just letting parents know that it's okay to push and it's okay to ask those questions and it's okay to say, what about this? It's not always like you said, the doctors are doing what they can and they want to be, giving answers and feedback, but it's okay to be the parent and say, well, what about this?
Exactly.
It might be, it might not be, but what about? Can we just look and see?
100%. Yep, absolutely. It really is a team effort between the doctors and the parents as, they're seeking the answers for their kids, and it's just awesome. So that I just think that's so cool. Okay, so this interview is going to be kind of in 3 parts. We're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about something completely different. Recently, you have had a very difficult but very educational experience with the Medicaid Appeals process here in Virginia. And so I'm hoping that you will tell us about that experience, maybe explain the circumstances that led to the issues that you were dealing with, what happened with everything, what you might do differently now, what you would do differently now that you know what you know, how you wish Medicaid and DMAS would change to make things easier for parents and easier for families, to ease the burden that families already carry, and maybe some advice you might give to other parents going through similar experiences. That was a lot of questions that I threw at you all at one time, but we can start right at the beginning. Just have you explain the situation and we can just kind of go from there.
Yeah, so back in 2021, we have been receiving attendant care services for Erica for, I think she was about 3.
Sorry, just real quick. Some people who watch this or listen to this will have no background at all in Medicaid or in what Medicaid waivers are or anything. So as you're telling the story, will you explain it as though I don't know anything? You know what I mean? Even though I do,
Sure.
but because
Yeah.
that way it helps those who listen to kind of have a broader sense of what it is that we're talking about. So when you talk about attendant care services, can you kind of explain a little bit about how your daughter even has attendant care hours in the first place? That type of thing.
So for our family, because I am a working mom, my husband works out of the home, we both work. When we found out that Erica had needs that kind of went beyond a typical daycare, she really wasn't, she went to a daycare when she was little, actually the daycare that I used to work at. And she did well there. She had no concerns. They understood her needs. They were able to support her. By the time she hit school age, she got to go early to preschool because of her needs. She had mobility needs. She used a walker. She, needed certain help with using the bathroom and feeding and all of those kind of things that by the time kids are in preschool, typically, one person can handle 10 of them. They're able to manage 10 children and have no issues caring for all of them. But Erica needed more than that.
Right.
And so for her, she got to go to developmentally delayed preschool through the infant toddler connection, which for us is really where we have services that are provided and offered. That was where Erica received her therapy when she was young, in order to get children who are developmentally delayed that may be able to progress on to not needing support through that process. But because she went through the school system and they developed an individualized education plan. So because Erica needed more care than what could be provided in a typical daycare, she qualified based on all of those needs, those mobility needs and all those things, to receive services in the preschool at a school age or at our elementary school. So she rode the bus before my other youngest child. So she was a young little thing riding the bus at 3 and loved it. She absolutely adored getting on the bus every morning and thought it was the coolest thing ever. So because of that and because of those needs, even once she got into kindergarten and was in a longer day, I still didn't have someone who could be there and care for her because she needed extra support. So she could not go to a typical daycare after school or an after school care or anything like that because she needed that additional level of care. So at that time, we started researching what Virginia had to offer, what kind of resources were out there for parents who worked, who had children with these needs that could not go to a typical preschool, or a typical after school care. Most after school cares, I don't know how many people know this, but if your child isn't potty trained at 5, even at 3 typically, but even especially at 5 in kindergarten, they're not going to accept her into somewhere where she can't independently go to the bathroom. And she was not able to do that. She needed help with those kind of things. So those kind of requirements led us to either me quit work, my husband quit work,
Right.
or we needed to find support and resources. So we did go through the state of Virginia, and we were able to have, at that time, it was a little different than it is now. You had to go through Department of Social Services, and they would come out and do an assessment on your child and basically your family, and interview and those kind of things to determine if she was qualified for services. So at that time, she did qualify for what at that time they called the elderly disabled child waiver. And so she was able to receive services where someone would be paid by the state to come into the home and provide her that care that she needed while we were not able to be at home.
Yep.
And so for us, that was a lifesaver because I like to work. I enjoy being a working mom. I have no concerns with being a working mom. My kids enjoy, I think, me being a working mom because I'm not hanging over their head all the time.
Families need that financially. It's not just that you enjoyed. I mean, families need to bring in enough income to provide for their families. And it's a huge issue when it comes to parents of children with disabilities, the financial strain that they experience when one of the parents cannot work.
Absolutely. Or for single parents. I mean, that's,
Yep.
they have to work. There is no choice. You can cut corners only so much. It is a valuable resource. And for us at that time, because I was slightly involved in some different things and I knew people, I had that resource. I think the biggest concern I have when it comes to Medicaid, services, waiver, resources, all of those things is they're not as accessible to people that don't have the resources to find them. And quite often, those are the people that probably need them more than even we did. And we needed them a lot.
Right.
But there's people that don't have access because they don't know about it. They've never heard of it. They have no connection to that. The school systems, even though they want to do a good job, my experience is they don't. They don't link people to the services they need as much as they should or could. Some of it is self-inflicted if you're a parent and don't choose to access the resources. That's sometimes that does happen, but for us it was really about I kind of knew, so I was able to get them a lot easier than someone who doesn't know.
Oftentimes people don't know what they don't know. When my daughter was young, if somebody hadn't said, hey, have you heard about, I never would have known to apply for a waiver for my daughter. I didn't understand that it was even available, that it even existed. I had no idea what a Medicaid waiver was when she was a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. It was somebody else mentioning it to me. I did not ask. Somebody just mentioned it. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to look into that. But if that doesn't happen so often for parents, they don't know. They don't know that there's this resource here. And it's just so important, like you said, for education to happen when it comes to parents. So anyway.
So that's probably one of my biggest issues across the board with Medicaid is, and it's too hard to get even the application completed and go through that process too. It's too difficult. It shouldn't be that hard
Yep.
to get our children what they need.
Yep.
It just shouldn't be that hard.
Right.
Because I started the waitlist process to be on so we have what transitioned from the elderly disabled child waiver to the CCC plus.
Right. Which I believe the name has changed again. Right. And so anyway.
Now it's Cardinal Care. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have that waiver, but that waiver only does limited services. And so for people that need residential care or people that need additional care beyond some of the basic supports of coming into the home and providing some level of support, you really need to be involved with the community living waiver in Virginia. And I knew it and I know it, but it took me until last year to get Erica on the wait list for it because it's so tedious. And I'm somebody, again, who I have the resources to go and connect with people and do what I need to do. And I know where to go to get the information. But it still, for me, was tedious. So for people that don't know about it and aren't told about it, once they are informed about it, just the process itself to get there is so challenging and so time consuming. And there's so much paperwork involved that it becomes almost, I don't have time for that. I've got to provide care for my child. I don't have time to do that right now.
Yep.
So I think those are some of the areas. But for us, once we got the waiver and we started receiving services, we had them for about probably 8 years before we started to see a change. And what we started to experience was a decrease in the amount of hours that were being approved for my daughter's care. And so February of 21, we received this was our first, they call it a denial notice or a notice of denial, where they weren't denying services altogether, but they had decreased our hours from 84 hours that somebody could come in and provide care down to 60, and that's biweekly. So we were receiving at one point 42 hours biweekly, and it dropped immediately to 30 hours biweekly.
Right.
Well, mind you, my husband and I both work outside of our homes. Some work is in the home, but most of it is outside of the home. And during the summer, now, during the school year, it's a little different because she was needing on average about 3 to 4 hours of care a day before we could get home from work. But during the summer, we're gone 40 to 50 hours a week. That's not 30 hours. That's, we're still having to supplement. And it's not that we can't supplement. It's not that we, but some people can't. It's
Right.
not that we shouldn't have to, if the services are available based on the needs of my daughter, it shouldn't even have to be a conversation.
Right.
And so we were frustrated with the fact that we received a denial. I appealed it. I talked to the doctor. I had her write a letter. We explained the needs of our daughter. It was never noted within the denial. The only thing that was noted within the denial was just that she didn't require that amount of time. And so when I appealed it to the insurance, and the way Virginia works is a little bit nuanced because they use managed care organizations that are kind of the intermediary. So it's not Medicaid telling you no per se, it's the managed care organization giving you this denial. So you have to go through that appeal process. And then if they deny you again, then you have to go up to the Medicaid appeal, which can be very daunting and very anxiety provoking because it's kind of like you against the world when you think of that.
Right.
So for me, I started with the managed care organization and got a denial from them, and I gave up. I said, I put in all of this information and you still don't see the need, and I don't know how to tell you more. And I honestly, at that point, I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the
Right.
energy to tell you more.
And I wonder
So
sometimes if that's what they're banking on, like
yes,
I hate to cast a bad light, like a whole a blanket statement on the intentions of everybody, because I know that's not fair. But I
yes,
do know there are scenarios where they are counting on you losing steam so that they can just move forward and save themselves money. And again, I hate saying it like that it's all negative and everybody has these intentions, but that happens. It does happen. And it takes a lot of energy and perseverance and grit. And quite frankly, I don't know a more exhausted population than parents of children with special needs.
right,
Already, when things are
right.
going well, we are amongst the most exhausted population. So to add this on top of it, it's enough to make anybody say, I just don't have it in me. And when people say that, I don't judge them for it because I totally understand. But if we don't fight, things won't change. So
That's true.
I I
So
love that you fought. So tell us about that.
so a year went by, almost a year, I guess, and it was November of 2022. So this is fairly recent.
Right.
We had seen it was like August, September, might have been back to back, and then again in November. We had seen it then go from the 30 hours a week, which we had just kind of dealt with over the time frame since 2021. And then we got a letter and it went down to, I want to say it was like 24 hours a week. And then we got another one and it went down to 19 and a half hours a week. And I just thought to myself, I can't, we can't, she
Right.
can't.
Right.
She needs someone here to be with her and support her. I have to work.
Yep.
My husband owns his own business now. He has to work. We have no choice. That is our livelihood.
Mhm.
So it became a fight. And that's when I started really digging in a little bit and trying to find a way. If this wasn't going to work, what was going to work? What was going to happen? So when we were in our PIP program, actually, I had started the advocacy there related to talking with the legislators about, is there another way?
Mhm.
If you're not going to support this with funding to support us through these things, is there another line of funding that you would support to
Mhm.
give parents that maybe their child doesn't have the high medical need, maybe they have more of a behavioral need, and that's not being supported well through ABA and therapists because you're on a wait list for 3 years before you can
Right.
get anybody to support you. So is there another line of funding that you'll support? And so I started down that path with the PIP project, talked to my local legislator, talked to some others, and I wasn't seeing a straight path there either. So when this final denial came in November of 2022, I just decided I had to fight. I just decided I had to put forth more effort. I had to just dig in and do the work, because if I wasn't going to do it, nobody was going to do it for me.
Right.
So I did reach out to a contact at that point at DMAS because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't misunderstanding what I was appealing. And
Yep.
I felt like I wasn't getting a clear line of what was being denied exactly. And I really needed to understand. So I found somebody within Department of Medical Assistance Services, Medicaid within Virginia, that I could at least just ask some questions of. They oversee the managed care programs. So I was able to just kind of ask some of those basic regulatory questions to try to find out if I was even fighting for the right fight. And the guidance I was given was really, yes, you are on the right track. There may be a couple things that aren't lining up just right. So let's see if we can get a meeting with the managed care organization. So we held that meeting, and there were very specific things the managed care organization was saying that was not allowable. They were denying based on caretaker situations as opposed to the needs of Erica.
Right.
And
They need to base it upon her needs, not who's available.
yeah, Exactly. And so that was reiterated a few times, and that really stuck in my head because even the DMAS representative was saying those things. So I was like, okay, I'm not wrong. I'm fighting the right fight.
Mhm.
And so fast forward to my submission was submitted and it was denied again. And I was like, okay, this is it. And so I put forth a letter. I added the doctor's information. I added our schedules, my husband and I's work schedule, a letter from my employer to show how often I'm out in the field. We submitted documentation from her, the requirements of the program in order for supervision to be counted because she cannot be left alone unattended.
Right.
And so even though they're not providing active care, they were trying to deny that she didn't need supervision level of support.
Right.
And so I just sent it all. I just sent everything I could think of. And even with that, I got some pushback, but we did finally get the approval to go through. And successfully, thankfully, they were able to, they backdated it from the time I sent the appeal in. So that's one thing for parents to be aware of, that if you appeal something, you get to maintain whatever it is you have in place throughout the appeal. Now, if the appeal hadn't gone through, they would have gone back and could have taken any of that back. But I was willing to risk that at that point.
Sure.
And my only thing at that time was I still have to keep. I'm at ease. We had our first renewal since the appeal, and it came through with the correct amount of hours. So we're back at 35 hours a week, which is working for us.
Right.
I'm not asking to go back to 42. So I think it will always be a point of anxiety every 6 months when these approvals go through. But I now know that I have the ability to push it through and to get things done. And I'm not fearful to take it up to Medicaid if I have to. I will
Right.
go through the Medicaid appeal process now if I have to. Hopefully, it will never get there again. But it's when you can do the work. It's just hard. It's just hard work, and it's hard to push through. And sometimes it's just not the right time.
And it's so time consuming. So depending on what else you have going on in your life, I mean, it is heavy and it is exhausting. And I hope a lot of people listen to this and listen to your story, because I think for so many of us, and I have felt this in regard to the advocacy work that I've done, not only, the work we did through PIP and getting some legislation passed in the General Assembly, but then just, advocating for my daughter in different spaces. So often we feel like, what can I possibly do? How can I possibly make a difference? When oftentimes we just have to try, and oftentimes we're not successful. I mean, that's the bottom line. Sometimes we are correct that we can't make the difference that we thought we were hoping that maybe we could. But sometimes we can. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it might not work the first time, but if you keep at it, it'll eventually work. And sometimes you are building the foundation and doing the legwork and getting the cause to a certain point, and then other people who join later are the ones that end up taking it over the finish line. And that's okay, because they wouldn't have been successful if you hadn't done the groundwork. And so, excuse me, it's just so important to, I guess that's the message that I would tag on to the end of your story. Try. You know what I mean? When we're faced with these issues, it is so exhausting, and oftentimes we need breaks. And if at certain phases of our lives we don't think we can do it, that's okay. But if you can at all find the energy and the time and the grit and the determination, try to change those issues that directly affect your family. Because when you do, and you end up being successful, not only do you get to walk away with that sense of empowerment that you took on the system and you got your family and your child what they needed, but the satisfaction of knowing that everybody that comes behind you is going to benefit from the hard work that you put into it. And that's how we, as a community in this disability space, that's how we are supporting one another and building one another up. And, there's that saying that the rising tide lifts all ships. And so as we are battling our own fight, engaged in our own battles, it's helping everybody who comes behind us. So anyway, good job, Warrior Mama, for getting your girl and your family what you needed. And because of your experience, I have no doubt there will be others who will have the courage to take on the system and to advocate for their children and get them what they need. So it's huge. And
I hope so.
I've been having ideas as I've been sitting here, and I was thinking to myself, I have a feeling that at some point I'm going to be calling Deanna and being like, okay, so tell me how to do this, because, there are some issues that I think I'm going to end up facing that what you've just explained, will benefit me. So I just love that you shared your story. So thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to shift one more time.
Yes.
So the last thing that I was hoping that you would talk to us about, and this issue is one that I have heard discussed by a lot of parents. It can be pretty emotional, and I'm really glad that you're willing to talk to us about this. So I'm hoping that you will talk about your daughter Erica's experiences as she has grown from childhood into her teen years. And I'm hoping that you'll talk to us about the importance of inclusion, but not just inclusion in special education and, in that space, but social inclusion with peers and other families and community events, just how important it is to actually, let me rephrase that. The importance of social inclusion for teenagers with disabilities. I'm hoping that you'll share with us a little bit about Erica's experiences, what that has been like for you as a mom to observe that and to go through that, because I know on a very personal level that, we carry our children's emotions, we carry their experiences. And it's one thing for us to go through hard things, but when we watch our kids go through hard things, it's gut-wrenching, right? And at the end of all that, I'm hoping that you'll, imagine if you had a magic wand and could change the world in this area, what would you change? How would you like the world to look for our children with disabilities and special needs as they go into teen years, and just the social aspect and some of the challenges that they face?
Yes, this one is going to be hard for me. This probably my biggest fear and where my heart works the most is trying to find the space for Erica to develop lifelong friendships.
Yep.
So, I'm sure you can remember, I have 3 very close friends that I have remained since high school. And my first one, we got together about 8th grade and have been friends ever since. And I'm nearing 50. So it's a lifelong friendship. We don't live close by, but when we get together, we go 2 years without seeing each other and we pick up right away. And for me, it's like, why isn't that something that Erica can have? Why can't she have that? But here she is at 16, and she has very few lifelong friendships that she's developing. She's got, one very close young lady that their birthdays are close together. They're both 16. They've been friends since they were in preschool. But they were in special education. They've grown up together, and there's nothing wrong with that. They have a beautiful friendship, and it's wonderful, and it's fostered, and they just adore each other and care about each other to the point where one's sick or one has something going on and they ask about the other person. And so she has that, but it's so limited, and it doesn't spread outside the special education community. And to me, it's disheartening. It's sad. And I shouldn't feel that way about my child. She's a happy child. She loves life. She loves socializing with people. But it's hard as a parent to watch your other children who developed and already have those friends that they will carry on until they're your age. That they're going to have adult friends that they've been friends with since high school.
Yeah.
It's so challenging because that when kids are in elementary school and, whether they're in special education or not, whether they're in a full inclusive setting or not, some school districts do it better. And I think that, it's one of those things where our school district does not do inclusion really. They do some, but it's not full inclusion. And I'm not saying that's the answer because I don't think that's the answer. What I'm seeking is my daughter's ability to have the same relationships with other people because teenage years are hard anyway.
Right.
And you don't always want to talk to your mom. If you're 16, you don't always want to talk to your mom. You don't want to always talk to your siblings. You want to have those friends that you can talk to and say silly things to. And it's just part of being a teenager. And so I think for me, I struggle because I know that that is something that she wants more than anything because she is social.
Right.
All of her delays over her years have been mobility, intellectual capacity, dental, vision, all of those kind of things. But her social is not on par, but it is right up there. She can joke with an adult. She can dig at you and give you little jabs here and there. She gets it. She's just that social piece of her is on fire. She knows it and she can interact with anybody, but it's either a paid caregiver or a family member. And when she was younger, you get invited to birthday parties and she would be involved in all of that. And I thought maybe a little timid of me to think, that was just normal and that was how it was going to continue through her life. I think I was being a little vulnerable and thinking that way because I saw some of those friends that I thought these are going to be those friends that she's going to hang on to. And during elementary, they were right there. They were, and, invited us to birthday parties and talked about having get-togethers and stuff like that never really materialized. And I think some of that was fear. Erica's always had a walker or needed help. She was pretty delayed in using the bathroom, so she needed help with those kind of things. And I think it was fear on parents not wanting to, how do I bring that child to my home and let them stay the night? How do I incorporate that into my life and what I do? And I'm busy, and people nowadays are so busy, and everybody's got to be involved in every sport and taken up every day and every hour. And, so it's partly that. I think it's just the way society is right now. People don't have time to sit back and say, I could take a couple hours and make this work, and I don't fault people for that. So it's not that I'm angry at society or anything like that, but why doesn't she deserve it?
She does.
She deserves that.
Yep.
I'm not the only parent that experiences this.
Nope.
I know that.
I've had so many conversations about this very thing with parents, and it's devastating because unlike, say, the Medicaid issue, where you were able to advocate with a system and get what you needed, what Erica needs in this regard, it's not something that you can advocate for in the same way. You can't make other people include her. But I think talking about it in this setting, I hope parents of typical developing teenagers might hear a story like this and realize how simple it is to include children who are different than their children in scenarios, and then teach their own children how easy it is to include children who have differing abilities in normal activities that any teenager would enjoy. Like you said, I think sometimes it's just people don't realize the impact on the children who have different challenges, the social emotional impact. It adds to anxiety, it adds to depression, it adds to social isolation, it adds to the emotional burden of the parents of those children. It's really disheartening. And in this space, we as parents of children with so many needs, I know for me, there have been times when I just feel so helpless. And this is a space, it's like, how do we fix this? What do we do? This is not a government bureaucracy that we're battling against. This is just like our neighbors. And the other families at our children's school or through our churches or our, Girl Scouts or whatever other organizations our kids may be involved in. It's it's well-meaning parents. They don't mean to not include, I don't think. I hope not. They just don't realize the impact when they don't encourage their children to include. And it has devastating consequences on children with disabilities.
You asked if I could wave a magic wand. I think for me, it's just about encouraging people to ask the question and encouraging people to ask how.
Yeah.
How can we do this? How can we include? Because the relationships need to develop organically. You didn't have somebody
Right.
telling you that this was going to be your best friend for the rest of your life. It happens organically. And if our children aren't given the opportunity to have an organic relationship develop through that time where they're able to go and be at someone's home and feel comfortable, because how many relationships did you have in high school that really didn't pan out? You didn't want to be friends with that person any longer.
It has
You
to be.
got to know them and you're like, yeah, I don't think that's not my person. I don't click with them.
Yeah.
So it has to happen organically over time. And if they're never given the opportunity to experience time one-on-one with that person, then they're never given an opportunity. And it goes both ways. It's us inviting people into our home. And, I take some ownership on that, because there were times when we would invite people, but then there were also times where I thought about it and I'm like, well, they really haven't reached out and haven't really seemed to interact after we met up. And so maybe they're not interested. So some of it falls on the parents too,
Sure.
because Erica doesn't have the skill set. If it were up to Erica, she'd be texting people. She wouldn't be able to do it legibly, but she'd be texting people all day long. So it's up to us as well. And I have to take ownership of that. And it's sometimes hard to be that self-reflective and say, it's not just society, it's me too. And I need to take ownership of that. But it is disheartening to me that she's 16 and doesn't have that big, robust network. And I'm not even saying it has to be big in numbers, but
Sure.
big and robust, meaning that she has just an overarching level of support outside of her family, that really care. And in the community, we go out and people say hi to her that I don't even know, because she has been well connected in the community through school, through one of her attendants that she had used to take her everywhere when they would go out and do things, and never was afraid to interact with people with her. And so that was always great. And she does have acquaintances throughout all of Culpeper. But it's those organic, lifelong connections that I'm really seeking for her. And I know that she wants that. She doesn't come out and say it because she doesn't know how to come out and say that. But in her interactions with people, I know that's what she wants. She wants those people because she looks at paid caregivers as her organic supports and her relationships. She sees those people, and yeah, it can be those. But, one of the things in my job, the state is always pushing, is natural supports within the disability community. And I laugh sometimes, and it's not because it's funny, it's because they make it sound like it's so simple.
Right.
That you have a 45-year-old who's just now living in the community, had maybe been in a training center their whole lives, and within a year of being in the community, they should just randomly have natural supports because we've developed that. It's not the agencies that are developing natural supports. It has to happen organically. You have to spend time with people and be able to be around people and not be supported by people, but just around people and experiencing people to develop those relationships. That doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
So I think for me, really getting people to talk more about it, because it's just not talked about. It's not acknowledged. It's not educated on. It's not. All these counselors we have in these schools could be doing a world of good if they would just do 20-minute in-services within, instead of doing a pep rally on Friday, do a 20-minute in-service on how to be inclusive and support people and ask the question and talk to people about how they're feeling, not just people with disabilities, but just people who are dealing with mental health concerns and anything like that. Talk to people. It's okay to ask a question. we would go out when Erica was little and she'd be in her wheelchair, her walker, and people would stare. It's that typical. And my other children would get so frustrated with people staring. Why do they stare all the time? And I just told them they just don't know. I would be okay if they would just ask a question. And we've had kids ask, like, why don't you walk? Like,
Right.
what's wrong with you? Why don't you walk? And we talk about it, and Erica will tell people. Erica's the biggest researcher of all of us. She sits with her iPod and looks up 4-H leukodystrophy and looks up her doctor's name and watches videos because her doctor is now transferred to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She watches videos about CHOP, and sometimes it's looking to the self-advocates to do the education. Like, let them get up there and speak what they want, what they need, what they experience, so people can hear it and really understand what they're experiencing.
And that's something that I have tried to share in conversation with other parents of, children that don't have special needs. What often happens is their children, especially when they're young and they don't have those social filters. It's actually great that little kids don't have social filters, right? And
Yes.
when they
Yes.
don't have those social filters and they stop and they stare at somebody who's different, and they might say, why can't that person walk? Or what's wrong with that person? Or, hey, mom, that person looks different than I do, or whatever. And oftentimes what those parents do is say, don't say that, come this way. And they
Right.
pull away. Parents, I'm going to give them credit. They think that they're doing the right thing. They think their child was rude, and they are
Right.
redirecting their children away from the situation so that that person with a disability or their parents or whomever is there isn't offended. But in fact, that's exactly the wrong thing for those parents to do.
Yeah.
Those sweet, innocent children who have no social
Yes.
filter might say, why can't that person walk? Or how come they look different than me? This is my message to those parents of typical functioning children. Engage in the conversation
Yes.
with family and with the person who is different with your children. Bring them
Yes.
over and say, hi, my name is Cindy, or my name is whatever, and what's your name? And my daughter had a question about, your walker. Will you tell her about your
Yes.
walker? Engage with the disability community,
Yes.
please, because
Yes.
there's this sense of social isolation that people with disabilities and families of children with disabilities experience when they are out in the community and everyone avoids them.
Yes.
It's horrible. It is
Yes.
so horrible. And I always try to give people credit. I don't think, for the most part, people mean to be rude. That's why
Right.
they are steering the other direction.
Yes.
That's why they're trying not to stare, or they're avoiding eye contact or whatever. But if you have not been that person out in public that everybody immediately looks away from, or walks way around, or completely avoids, you don't understand the social isolation that you experience in a crowded space, and no
Yes.
one acknowledges your existence. It's horrible. It is
And
horrible.
Erica still to this day, so sometimes she walks either arm in arm. She's still able to do that, walks with her walker, use her wheelchair. And she herself at 16, who uses all those devices, will still look at other people and stare at other people. And we talk, like, she'll say, oh, they have a wheelchair like mine. And the person's in the wheelchair and she's walking with me and may not realize that she uses a wheelchair, but it's, she's like, oh, that's like mine, And so it's totally okay. Like, it's okay to ask those questions, and it's better to just talk about it and be exposed in there. And I guarantee that if there is somebody who doesn't want to express what's going on with them, or
Yeah,
they will say politely, thank you for asking, but I'd rather not talk about it. No,
exactly.
I don't think anybody's going to get upset and say, get away from me. Like, I just feel like the people I know in this community, they would rather you express like a question or talk to them than just exclude and walk away.
And so for me, I think when you're talking about this issue with just those social connections, that's the first step for a lot of people. When you're out in public, don't avoid people that are different than you. Don't avoid people with disabilities or families of, small children with disabilities. Don't avoid them. It doesn't mean you have to go and engage in this whole conversation with them. but don't look away or walk way around. Smile and say hello just like you would to anybody else. I mean, at the very
Yes.
least, say, hi, how are you today? It's so
Yep.
simple. And
Yes.
it helps alleviate that for, the people in this community. And from there, as your children are building friendships at school and so on and so forth, my ask to other parents who don't have children with disabilities is, will you please encourage those relationships with children with disabilities? And if your child wants to invite somebody with a walker or somebody with a wheelchair, over, if you just ask the parent and say, we would like this to happen, what do you need from us in order to make our home accessible? It usually isn't nearly as difficult as you might think it will be. And it just does so much to build up the self-esteem of a teenager with special challenges and this is not like, we're not asking for charity. We're just asking for
Mhm.
just friendship. You know what? Invite our children to the pizza party. Invite them to, I was going to say to go swimming. Sometimes that's a challenge, but if they can't, they'll let you know, but they probably can. You know what I mean? With a few little accommodations is probably possible. And it just makes a world of difference. And like you said, we need to talk about this more because you are not the only person that I've had come on Warrior Stories, and then even conversations I've had with countless parents outside of, this, interview space. It's a devastating thing that a lot of families go through and a lot of children with disabilities go through as they go through their teen years, is just wanting those sincere friendships. So thank you so much for sharing that specifically and talking about something that really is, for moms, it really is heartbreaking because we feel really helpless in this space. But also, Deanna, thank you for sharing everything about your daughter's, diagnosis and everything that you went through with that when she was little, and then the battle with Medicaid and the appeals process. And for now, fingers crossed, everything continues to work out as you do that every 6 months. But the win that you had at the end of that appeals process, and that it's the message to other parents, it's worth engaging in that fight because you might be successful at the end of it. And if you are, you're going to get your family what they need, and you're going to help educate other families about the process so that they can get their kids what they need. So anyway, I'm just so grateful that you took the time today to come on Warrior Stories and to share your story, your insight, your wisdom, and to help educate those who come after you, who have had similar experiences, so that hopefully they can get their kids what they need, but then also that they perhaps won't feel so alone. And that's a huge reason why I do Warrior Stories. Is it's so easy, like we've mentioned many times throughout this conversation, it's so easy to feel alone in this space. And I just don't want other families to feel alone.
Well,
So
thank you for what you're doing with these warrior stories, because I think it really will have an impact long term. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on today and talk with you.
absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we'll be in touch, and I'll let you know when I have this interview edited and posted online, and then you can share it with whomever you need to. And I look forward to just keeping in touch in the future and seeing how.
Yeah, I hope to stay connected as well. I appreciate this. It's been nice getting to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Thanks, Deanna. We'll talk.
Thanks, Susanna. Take care. Bye.